Paramasukhadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganasadisham Tattvamasya Dilakshyan Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Nabami Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayoh Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Today also I'm Swami Nityadipananda giving proxy for Swami Shantatmanandaji. He is busy with a youth convention which has been organized, and he is parallelly giving a talk there also. So in his place, I'll be speaking today about life of Swami Brahmanandaji Maharaj. His birthday is falling on the 2nd of February. So we shall discuss his life in brief. Swami Brahmanandaji was the first president of the Ramakrishna order. A person who is immersed in God consciousness talks about God, thinks about God always. For him, it is very painful to listen to the worldly people talking about mundane things. Sri Ramakrishna, he would say that his ears are burnt hearing to the worldly people's talk. And he would pray to the Divine Mother. Quite often he would pray to the Divine Mother, give me such a boy who is very sincere in his love for God and always remains with me. After such a prayer, he had a vision of the Divine Mother once. Of course, he had several visions of the Mother, or quite often he used to have the visions of Mother. One particular vision, which is very, because it is to the context we are talking about today. So this particular vision he had of the Divine Mother, she put a small child on his lap. She dropped a small child on his lap and said, "This is your son." Sri Ramakrishna was very much shocked. How can I have a son? I look upon all women as divine manifestations of the Divine Mother. How can I have a son? He was thinking. And he prayed again to the mother, how can I have a son like this? Like any other worldly man, can I have a son? He was praying to her. Then the mother, she again said, it's not a son in this worldly sense. He is your spiritual son. He is your Manasaputra, she said. And after a few days, again Sri Ramakrishna had a vision. He saw a huge lotus floating, fully bloomed lotus floating along the Ganges. And on that lotus, fully bloomed lotus, he saw Sri Krishna holding hand of a young boy and then dancing. Then he recognized the boy who was holding the hand of Sri Krishna was none other than the person, the boy whom he had seen in a vision being laid on his lap by the Divine Mother. So he recognized, oh, this is going to be the son who is to be born, who is to come, rather. And the very same day, in the evening, he saw a young boy. He arrived from Konnagar by boat, crossing the Ganges. And this boy, his name was Rakhal Chandra Ghosh, who later on became Swami Brahmananda. Rakhal Chandra Ghosh, as he was called, Swami Brahmananda, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that there are, in his divine play, 6 of his disciples were Ishvara Kotis. that is Nitya Siddhas, they're ever perfect, they're ever perfect beings who have come with him. The incarnation of God, about incarnation of God, he said they don't have liberation, they do not have mukti. They have to be born again and again, but not like the worldly people who are in bondage. They are born and again and again. He used to compare an incarnation of God like a police force. The police force, depending upon the riot, how big the commotion is. If there is a huge commotion, huge lot of people revolting, and it's a big commotion that is caused, then depending upon that commotion, the police force is being sent to, to curtail that, to subside that commotion. But if the commotion is a small extent, then a lesser number of police force is needed. Like that, incarnation also, God incarnates as a human being. Often and often, whenever there is a decline in the dharma or the righteousness in this world, when adharma, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati, dharmasya glani, whenever there is a decline in righteousness, abhyuttanam adharmasya, when the adharma rises, shows up its head, becomes more dominant, then the divine incarnation comes. God takes a human form and appears in this world to re-establish dharma, to re-establish dharma. So the divine power, the same divine power, incarnates again and again, depending upon the necessity. So one incarnation is bigger than the other. We cannot compare. It is the same God. Depending upon the situation, depending upon the circumstances, he takes different forms and comes. And along with the divine incarnation, some eternally pure souls also take birth. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of a kind of a green, a kalmi shag, he used to say. It grows in water, and they grow in bunches. They do not come in single way. They grow in bunches. So when you pull out one portion of it, the entire bunch comes out. Like that, when the incarnation comes, a group of eternally pure souls, they also take birth. They are called as Ishvara Kotis. So along with Sri Ramakrishna, there were 6 Ishvara Kotis he used to refer to. Swami Vivekananda, Narendra was one of the Ishvara Kotis. Swami Brahmananda, Rakhal. Swami Premananda, Baburam Maharaj. Then Yogananda, Niranjanananda, and Purnachandra Ghosh. These were the 6 Ishvara Kotis that came along with the incarnation of this age, Sri Ramakrishna. So Rakhal Chandra Ghosh was an Ishvara Koti he used to refer to. Sri Ramakrishna used to refer to him as an Ishvara Koti. And in the Ramakrishna order, he is also well known. Like Swamiji is, Swami Vivekananda is well known in the Ramakrishna order as Swamiji. Swamiji, if you refer to Swamiji, it is Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji's birthday today, last week it was Swamiji's birthday. If you say it's Swami Vivekananda's birthday, it's easily understood by everyone. In the same way, in the Ramakrishna order, if you refer to Raja Maharaj or simply Maharaj, it means Swami Brahmananda. And how did he get this name, Raja or Raja Maharaj, or simply Maharaj? Once at Kashipur Garden House, Sri Ramakrishna was lying in his last illness. He told Naren about Rakhal. Rakhal has a very keen intellect of a king, he used to say. He had a keen intellect of a king, and he can rule a kingdom. Such is his organizing power and his administrative capacity that he can rule a kingdom, he would say. And Naren immediately understood what Sri Ramakrishna wanted. He understood that Rakhal should be the leader of his disciples. So immediately, Naren, he said to his other brother disciples, henceforth we shall call Rakhal as Raja, or he is normally referred to as Maharaj, the great king of the Ramakrishna order. Rakhal Chandra Ghosh was born on 21st January 1863 in a small village called Shikra Kulingram. It is about 50 kilometers from Calcutta. He was born in a very wealthy family of landlords. His father, Ananda Mohan Ghosh, was a big landlord. And this boy lost his mother at a very young age. And after a preliminary education in the village, at the age of 12, he was brought to Calcutta. And he was pursuing a English education in a school in Calcutta. So during his school days, he used to visit a gymnasium nearby. He was for physical exercises. He used to go there regularly. There he got acquainted with Narendranath Datta, who later on became Swami Vivekananda. From very young age, Rakhal had a very quiet nature and was deeply religious in his temperament. So, seeing his spiritual inclination, Anand Mohan was worried. Like in the life of Buddha, we get when Buddha, after the birth of Buddha, all the priests they saw his horoscope when his horoscope was written. They said he would either be a king, big kingdom, he will be ruling over a big kingdom, or he would renounce the world and become a saint. So his father, Siddharth, his father, Shuddhodana, he said, okay, let me keep my son in luxury so that he may not, he will not have any inclination towards God. He should not see any suffering. When he sees this world suffering, he would give up his worldly life, and then he would turn to the life of monkhood. So this was the what the priest predicted. So Shuddhodana, he kept his son away from all miseries of this world and kept him in luxury. But by perchance, he came to he went to the city, and then he saw so many sufferings, and then he took to the life of a monk. So similar way, Ananda Mohan, seeing the inclination towards religious life, so much of deep religious interest Rakhal was having, noticing this, he thought, I mean, we should bind him in this worldly life. So the method all householders they apply is that get him married. So at a very young age, at the age of 16, he was married. But the inscrutable other ways of the divine plans are very inscrutable. Ordinary people cannot understand. Like Ananda Mohan did not have any inkling at all. He wanted to bind him in the worldly life, but the same means which normally binds a human being became a means for Rakhal, cutting asunder the bondages of this world, the bindings of this world. The girl to whom he was married, that family, his in-laws, were all devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. His mother-in-law, she would visit quite often to Dakshineshwar and meet Sri Ramakrishna. So later on, when Rakhal used to spend quite some time in Dakshineshwar with in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, the holy company of Sri Ramakrishna, and less he would visit their own house, the in-laws' house. His visiting the in-laws' house started coming down. His neighbors, her neighbors, her in-laws, his mother-in-law's neighbors, and her relatives, they all started telling her, is it that your son going to become a monk? That he is so much associated with Sri Ramakrishna, and finally will he renounce the world and become a monk? They would apprehensively ask her, his mother-in-law, and she would very happily reply, "Oh, such a great good fortune will it come to me? I'll consider myself very blessed if such a good fortune comes to me," she would say. So such was the family to which uh, Rakhal got associated after his marriage. And his brother-in-law, Manomohan Mitra, he used to visit Sri Ramakrishna, and he was the one who brought Rakhal to Dakshineshwar for the first time. So after his first visit to Dakshineshwar, meeting Sri Ramakrishna, his visits started increasing more number of times. He started frequenting Dakshineshwar and would spend a lot more number of days with Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna showered affection on Rakhal, and Rakhal, who lost his mother at his young age, he no more felt the lack of motherly affection because of the love showered on him by Sri Ramakrishna. And the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna was with Rakhal. It cannot be so easily comprehended by ordinary people. Rakhal would behave like a small child. He would lie down on his lap, and Sri Ramakrishna would play him as if he was playing with a young child. He was 16, 17 years old then, when he, maybe little more than that, 20 years of age, when he visited Sri Ramakrishna. But Sri Ramakrishna would play with him like a young child, sometimes feed him, and Rakhal would climb on his shoulders, etc. Ananda Mohan did not like Rakhal spending more time at Dakshineshwar than with his in-laws. So he tried to dissuade Rakhal from visiting Dakshineshwar. He used to advise him, he used to tell him with tender words, and then maybe slight rebuke. But none of these ways brought any avail, was of any avail. He could not stop Rakhal from visiting Dakshineshwar. At last, finding no other alternative, he just locked him up in a room in his house. And this forceful confinement imposed by Ananda Mohan on Rakhal increased his longing to meet Sri Ramakrishna. His attraction for Sri Ramakrishna increased hundredfolds when this confinement was forced upon Rakhal. And again, as the fate would have it, Ananda Mohan also became involved in a difficult lawsuit, which, on consultation with the lawyers, Ananda Mohan understood that it is very difficult to win that lawsuit. So it was sure that he was going to lose it. But Ananda Mohan pursued fighting with the case, in spite of knowing very well that he would lose the case, the lawsuit. But the providence proved all logic wrong, all the reasoning wrong. Miraculously, he won the lawsuit, and he became so surprised, he could not believe it, and became so happy. And he thought it should be some kind of a divine grace because of which he won this lawsuit. And he credited it to his son, he being associated with being associated with the holy company of Sri Ramakrishna, coming in contact with the Sri Ramakrishna. Because of that, this punya, the merit which he has gained because of this close association with this holy man, definitely has helped him win over this case. So this is what he thought, and then he released Rakhal from the confinement, and he allowed him to visit Sri Ramakrishna freely. So Rakhal started frequenting Dakshineshwar, and also spending more time in the company of Sri Ramakrishna. And before coming to Sri Ramakrishna, Rakhal used to visit the Sadharan Brahma Samaj along with Naren. Naren was a regular visitor. He was a singer in that in the congregations of the Sadharan Brahma Samaj. So Naren, along with Naren, Rakhal also started visiting the Sadharan Brahma Samaj, and he enrolled himself as a member of the Sadharan Brahma Samaj. So, according to the rules of the Sadharan Brahma Samaj, one who enrolls himself as a member of the Samaj, he has to sign some agreement, a kind of a pledge he has to make that he would not worship God in a personal God, or he would not go to temples and worship idol worship, etc. He would not do. And one mode of worship, which is God without form. So that is the only way. I mean, that is the only kind of worship the members should do. So this is a kind of an agreement they have to sign. So once when Rakhal and Naren, they both became members of this Brahma Samaj, and they used to visit Sri Ramakrishna also, but individually, not together there. So one day, Rakhal had come to Dakshineshwar, and he was in Sri Ramakrishna's room. Naren also accidentally came that day, and it was just a coincidence that both came to Dakshineshwar on the same day at the same time. And after some time, when Sri Ramakrishna went to the Kali temple, Rakhal also went along with him. And Sri Ramakrishna prostrated in front of the Divine Mother in the temple, and Rakhal also followed suit. He also did the same thing. Seeing this, seeing this from a distance, Naren became so angry because Naren was so committed to truth. I mean, he cannot stand untruth at all. So, since both of them had signed an agreement that they would not worship idol or a personal god, he saw now Rakhal transgressing that agreement. Right, he is going against the pledge which he has already made. So he became angry, and then he rebuked Rakhal. He shouted at him. Right, so and like a mother bird, Sri Ramakrishna protected Rakhal. Rakhal was a very mild-natured, very soft-spoken, mild-natured person. So he did not reply to Naren when he scolded him. From then on, started avoiding Naren. He used to be very much afraid of him, and he would avoid him. And Sri Ramakrishna, like a mother bird, protecting its young one under its wings, he protected Rakhal, telling Naren, how can, now Rakhal believes in God with form, right? So how can you change, force upon one particular attitude, religious attitude upon a person? Whatever attitude he is born with, one tends to follow that. You cannot force upon one's religious attitude upon others. So now he believes in God with form, so you cannot stop him. How can people right in the beginning worship God without form? They cannot conceive of God without form in their minds. So you do not find fault with Rakhal. He is, after all, very much afraid of you. He's a such soft-spoken person, and a very kind, a very mild-natured person. So do not try to change his attitude, he said. From then on, Naren, who himself was a lover of freedom, he did not further interfere and try to change Rakhal's religious attitude. Though Sri Ramakrishna had great affection for Rakhal, he would he would take to task whenever Rakhal made some mistake. He erred whenever such a mistake was there. When he sees some mistake committed by Rakal, he would not. He would. He would be. He would take him to task. So once a prasad had come from the Kali temple, mother's temple. Prasad had come to Sri Ramakrishna's room, and Sri Ramakrishna was not in his room. Rakhal was there alone. So immediately he took the prasad, some butter, etc. was there. So he took the prasad, butter, from the prasad which had come from the Kali temple. Later on, when Sri Ramakrishna saw Rakhal eating this prasad alone, he rebuked him. How is that? It's because it is a custom that first it is offered to the elders, and Sri Ramakrishna being a very revered person, it's first, and it's meant for Sri Ramakrishna that it has come to his room. So without offering him, he had taken it. So Sri Ramakrishna rebuked him. You become so greedy. Coming here, you should give up all your greed. One by one, all your desires you should give up. You're becoming more and more greedy. How come you took that? You should develop some self-control. Come here and staying here. You should have learned that, he said. And on another occasion, Rakhal was going on a road somewhere. He saw a coin, money lying on the road. So he picked up that coin and gave it to some poor man beside. So he was so happy that he had helped a person. He did not take that money for himself, which was lying on the ground. So when Sri Ramakrishna heard about it, he again rebuked him, which Rakhal did not expect at all. He said, a person who is not interested in fish, who does not take fish, or who is not at all interested in it, what business has he got in the fish market? Like that, if you do not have any, if you do not value money so much, you have taken to the path of religion, and you should not value money so much. And if you do not value money so much, why did you go about picking it up and giving it to a man and thinking that you have done a great help to him? So Sri Ramakrishna could see that greed in a subtle form, right? This greed is in subtle form is manifesting itself in the form of some philanthropy. So he wanted his spiritual son to be free from lust and greed, two great obstacles in the spiritual life. Sri Ramakrishna was a very hard taskmaster. He insisted his disciples to unite mind and speech. This man mukh ek karna hai. Right? So one day, Rakhal returned from Calcutta. Normally, Sri Ramakrishna would be so happy to meet Rakhal or Naren. They were very, very, very dear to him. So whenever they visited, he would be so happy to meet them. That particular day, when Rakhal came to Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna was telling, how is that I'm not able to see your face at all? Some black covering is coming in between, and then I'm not able to look at your face. Look up at your face. Look at your face. He say, did you commit something wrong? Some immoral act, stealing, or hurting somebody, or did you cheat anybody, or speak a lie, etc. Rakhal also did not remember anything as such, whether he had committed any sin or not. So he did not remember at all. He was also thinking hard. See, what have I done? What wrong have I done? I haven't done anything wrong the whole day. Sri Ramakrishna said, think deeply, try to find out what is the reason that I'm not able to see your face at all. I look up to your face. Then after some time, Rakhal remembered, oh, he had spoken a very small lie, a fig. There's a little playfully with his friend. He had spoken something, some lie. This he remembered, oh, I spoke such and such a thing in a very friendly manner. It's only I mean, very harmless lie which I had spoken to my friend in a playful manner, he said. But Sri Ramakrishna was very serious about it. He said, never do this again. Truth alone is a spiritual discipline in Kali Yuga. One who sticks to truth sits on the lap of God, he said. Satyameva Jayate, the Upanishad also speaks about it. And the Kena Upanishad also speaks about the greatness of truth. He says, Satyam Ayatanam. Satyam is the residence, is a place where the Brahma Jnana resides. Highest knowledge resides in Satya. One who sticks to Satya only can attain this. Satyena panta vitato devayana. The Mundaka Upanishad also speaks about the greatness of Satya, because the path leading to the gods, Satyena pantha, is laid by Satya. If one wants to attain God, one should very strongly hold on to this truth. Satyena pantha, by the lay path towards Devayana. The Devayana path is laid by Satya. It's constructed by Satya, he says. The Upanishad says. So Sri Ramakrishna was a very hard taskmaster. Seeing this great affection for Rakhal, Rakhal also developed a kind of possessiveness towards Sri Ramakrishna. He thought he belongs to me only. He became jealous when a lot of devotees thronged at Dakshineshwar to Sri Ramakrishna. Or somebody spoke, did not behave properly with Sri Ramakrishna, he would become uncontrollably angry. Once there was an invitation to one Brahma devotee's house. There was some function, right? The Brahmotsav used to take place in different houses of the Brahma devotees, and they would most often invite Sri Ramakrishna also. When there is kirtan, Sri Ramakrishna would dance and sing in a deep ecstatic mood. So he would be invited invariably in most of the Brahmotsavs in different devotees' house. So one such invitation was there, and Sri Ramakrishna took Rakhal also along with him. And there, after the kirtan was over, when it was time for feeding the devotees, the host, they simply ignored Sri Ramakrishna. They were busy entertaining other guests, right? Other guests, and simply did not mind to take care of Sri Ramakrishna. Rakhal also was there. Rakhal became so angry. How is that they could ignore you? Come, Mahashay, let's go. We'll take a carriage and go away to Dakshineshwar. No more. We'll wait here. Such, untoward behavior from the house, from the host is not good, he thought. But Sri Ramakrishna again scolded him, saying, what is the use of such a anger at this late hour? Where will we get food when we go back to Dakshineshwar? Be practical. Simply showing anger will not do. At this hour, where will we get our food? And moreover, if, Dakshineshwar is quite far from here, from Calcutta. How will you go? We don't have money for the carriage. We should ask money from the host only. So don't get angry, he said. So somehow they took food, prasad there. He was made to sit in a very unclean place, and somehow in a dark place, in a dark corner of the house, he was made to sit. And then Sri Ramakrishna somehow took the prasad, and while returning, he was telling a very important thing to Rakhal. See, we are all holy men. Holy men should not, should take something when we visit the householder's place. You should take something, otherwise it will be inauspicious. It will not, it will not augur good for the householders. So it will be inauspicious if you visit a holy place, the devotee's house, and do not take anything. At least a glass of water you should ask and take, he'd say. During the last illness, the master was staying at Kashipur Garden House, and Rakhal, severing all his family ties, started living at Kashipur along with Naren and other brother disciples. And he was wholeheartedly involved in serving the master day and night, ailing master. At the same time, they all practiced severe spiritual disciplines under the leadership of Narendranath, who who gave them enthusiasm in the spiritual disciplines that they practiced. So, after the passing away of the master on 16th of August 1886, the disciples were very much drowned in sorrow, and they were at the same time overpowered by tremendous dispassion towards the world. And there was intense longing for God. Sri Ramakrishna had lighted in their hearts this intense longing for God. So they were now burning. It was now started burning into as it has become a huge fire, and it started burning in their hearts. So under the guidance of Narendra, they all formed a Ramakrishna monastery at Baranagar. And in 1887 January, they all took to formal sannyasa, performing the Viraja Homa, and Rakhal became Swami Brahmananda. Brahmananda, with longing to realize God, he visited several holy places solely depending on God. Puri, Omkareshwar. Sometimes he went to the banks of Narmada. He visited Ayodhya, Varanasi, Vrindavan, Panchavati, and the banks of Godavari and many other holy places. And he performed severe austerities and spiritual practices. Some interesting incidents during his stay in various holy places. At Vrindavan, he was embodiment of total self-surrender to God, right? Living totally on God, and not even attempting to go to beg food. Like they used to call it as Ajagar Vritti, a python. It will not move out of its place, so it will attract food. It would attract its prey lying at its own place. So like that, the sadhus also sometimes practice this Ajagar Vritti, not making any attempt to go out and beg for food. That whatever the devotees provided, they would stay at one place, and then all the necessities, whatever comes on the way, they would take it and be content with that. Once, during a severe winter in Vrindavan, he was staying in the Gauri Kunda, in the Radha Kunda in Vrindavan, and Turiyanandaji was also with him. They were doing severe tapasya there, staying in a hut. So one day, a devotee placed a woolen blanket in front of the hut. And after some time, another thief came in and he took away that blanket. And Maharaj was simply sitting there silently witnessing the play of Maya. At Vrindavan, he was immersed in such, in tapasya, that Vijay Krishna Goswami, a Vaishnava saint who used to visit Sri Ramakrishna, and he was earlier a Brahmo Acharya, a teacher in the Brahma Samaj. And later on, he took to Vaishnavism after coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. And then Sri Ramakrishna used to rate him very highly as a spiritual aspirant. So he once asked Rakhal, well, he was also staying at Vrindavan, and he asked Rakhal, the master had given you all that is covetable in the spiritual life. Whatever is needed in spiritual life, he has given you. He has given you several visions, and he has also given you the samadhi, experience of samadhi. And why do you practice austerity so much even after that? And Brahmanandi humbly replied, the experiences and visions that I've got by the grace of the master, I'm trying to make it my own, a possession, my own possession by doing tapasya, he said. And now we shall see the love Swamiji had towards Raja Maharaj. Swamiji used to say, amongst us, Rakhal is the greatest in spirituality. He would tell his brother disciples, he is the greatest amongst us in spirituality, he would say. And when he returned, when Swamiji returned from America after participating in the World Parliament of Religion and becoming so successful in his preaching of Vedanta in the West, when he returned back to India, There was a grand reception given everywhere, first in Ceylon, then in South India, Chennai, and other places in South India. And then again, when he came to Calcutta, there was a grand reception arranged. And Rakhal, Swami Brahmananda, he was there in the forefront to receive Swamiji. When Rakhal garlanded Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji bowed down with great reverence and humility to Rakhal. He said, Guruvat Guruputreshu, just like the son of a guru should be treated in the same manner as you do, with the same reverence as you do for the guru. Guruvat Guruputreshu, he said. And Brahmanandaji immediately returned and he offered his pranams to Swamiji and said, elder brother is like one's own father. He should be like you respect your father, the same way you should respect your elder brother also. And then he offered his pranams with great reverence to Swami Vivekananda. And after establishing the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission, Swamiji made Brahmanandaji as a president of the order. Recollecting the words of the master, he said, Rakhal can rule a kingdom. He has the intellect of a king. He can rule a kingdom. He is a great organizer and administrator. So he handed over all the money which he had collected at the West for the Indian work. Swamiji, he handed it over to Brahmanandaji. I'm relieved now. I've handed over the sacred trust to a right person, he said. He had great faith in Raja Maharaj. He would say that even if all my brothers leave me alone, they do not follow me, they desert me, Rakhal and Haribai would never desert me at all. They would not give up. They will stick to me till the end, he said. And during his last dates, Swami Vivekananda, he was preparing himself he has completed his mission. He has preached Vedanta all over the world. He had established the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission and to propagate the highest realizations of Sri Ramakrishna amongst the common masses. So Swamiji was preparing to give up his body. He has accomplished his mission, and he had delegated all his responsibilities to the brother disciples, and mainly to Brahmanandaji and Sharadanandaji. And Sister Nivedita was also there in Calcutta. She had started a school for the girls. So Sister Nivedita was asking him whom she must consult in future about the work which she had started, about the school. Whom should I seek for advice and whom should I consult regarding the work? And Swamiji said about Rakhal Maharaj, he recommended Rakhal Maharaj. He said, the old man, that is Sri Ramakrishna, his judgment never failed, but mine always did. His own judgments failed often, but Sri Ramakrishna's judgment never failed. And he said, if you ask my advice or to get your business done, for your business work done, it is Brahmananda. I recommend him, he said. None else. None else. With this, my conscience is very clear. So he recommended Rakhal Maharaj to Sister Nivedita. You should consult him. I'm very much clear about it, he said. And as a president, Rakhal visited several places, and he was always very reluctant to talk. He was a spiritual dynamo. He did not like to talk much about religion. He was very much drawn. He was drawn inwards, and it was very difficult to draw him to speak on spiritual matters. He would keep silent. He was an awakener of souls and inspirer of all human beings. But his teachings came straight from his heart and his experiences. So once he visited, when he went to Chennai, Madras, then Ramakrishnanandaji was there. So one of the devotees asked him, will this new Swami who has come from Belur Mutt, will he speak? Will he give lectures like Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda? Then Ramakrishnanandaji replied to him, what is there in a lecture? He never lectures, he said. See, people like of such spiritual stature, they can give spirituality to people just by mere look or touch. They don't give he doesn't give lectures, he said. And most of the time, when Rakhal Brahmananji was in Calcutta, he used to spend in Balaram Mandir, Balaram Babu's house. There he used to avoid devotees. If he sees some devotees come from a distance, he would go to his room and lock himself up there. He would not come out. He would try to avoid. And if somebody approaches him without his knowledge and tries to speak to him, he would he would show a very grave face, indicating his stomach. My stomach is not good, so I cannot speak. Patting his stomach, he would say that his stomach is not good. He cannot, so there can be no conversation today. So you may leave, he would say. Once a very funny incident. Swami Rakhal Maharaj, that is Raja Maharaj, the Swami Brahmananda ji, he was always reluctant to give speech, etc. So once he was asked to preside over a meeting, probably somewhere in Chennai or somewhere. And then he was asked to speak. Now, they announced, now Swami Brahmananda ji, he will deliver his presidential address now. Then Rakhal Maharaj, Raja Maharaj, he simply got up. He said, I, Swami Brahmananda, President, Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission, Belur Mutt, Howrah 711202, and then sat down. He gave his address, the postal address, presidential address means president's postal address he gave and simply sat down. Such was a smart joke he used to play. And during his last days, he spent his last days at Balaram Mandir. And in March 1922, he was afflicted with cholera and then diabetes. At last, the end came on 10th April 1922. On the fateful day, many devotees, sadhus and brahmacharis visited him, came to see him. He blessed them heartfully and abundantly. He blessed them. May you have a realization of God in this birth itself. Such things he blessed him. And late in the evening, he went into an extraordinary mood. He saw a wonderful vision and he exclaimed, these are the words which are described in his biography. Ah, here is a full moon, Ramakrishna. I want the Krishna of Ramakrishna. I'm the cowherd boy of Vrindavan. Put anklets on my feet. I want to dance holding the hand of Sri Krishna. Krishna, Krishna has come. Don't you see him? How beautiful my Krishna is on the lotus of Vrindavan. My play is over now. Look, the Krishna is caressing me. He is calling me to come away with him. I'm coming. Om Vishnu, Om Vishnu, Om Vishnu. So he passed away fully conscious of his true nature and merged into Mahasamadhi. One more interesting before I close, one interesting incident. So around 1910, Sharadanandji had written the Leela Prasanga, the biography of Sri Ramakrishna. So in that he had described about this vision of Sri Ramakrishna, Rakhal playing with dancing with Sri Krishna on a lotus. This vision which Sri Ramakrishna had, he had described it there. And Premanandaji, he was going through the manuscript of this Leela Prasanga then. And then he approached Sharat Maharaj, Sharadanandji, and said, Hey Sharat, what have you done? Rakhal is still living. Don't you remember what the master used to say about Rakhal? If he comes to know about his true nature, Rakhal will give up his body. This master has told you. Don't you remember that? And the master and Rakhal is still living. So immediately, Sharat Maharaj, this manuscript had gone for print in the press. And immediately Sharadanji rushed to the printing press and took back the manuscript and removed this portion from the manuscript and gave it for the print. And he destroyed it, he mutilated this thing, the document, the manuscript, which contained this portion where Sri Ramakrishna had the vision of Rakhal dancing with Sri Krishna. So when he sees this, Rakhal will soon give up his body. This was way back in 1910. Later on, Raja Maharaj lived for 12 years more. So Swami Brahmananda ji played the role of a king in the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. He ruled the kingdom with love, affection, and compassion. So may I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swamiji Maharaj, and Rakhal Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda ji, that may we have unflinching love and devotion towards God. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.